Creating your own watercolor wallpaper is easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it, no matter your skill level. Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos, and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools, and let's get started. So one of the most important things, if not the most important things, is to make sure you are working in a file with some sort of a paper texture. So as you can see here, I do have some grain in my file, and it comes from a pre-textured file, which as you can see is just a Procreate file with some layers in it. A lot of brush creators do provide pre-textured files, at least I do. So if you have one of those, you could start by just opening one of those canvases. I am personally working with the watercolor file that comes in my big brush bundle. If you want to check it out, it will be linked in the description below. That being said, don't worry, if you don't have any pre-textured file, I also have a free sample that you can download in the description below. It's totally free. And once you have it on your iPad, just go ahead and open up a new canvas, probably just the size of the iPad screen, doesn't really matter for now. And then to import the paper texture, go in the wrench icon menu here at the top. In the Add submenu, select Insert a File, not a photo, a file. And then if you navigate back to the kind of root of your iPad files, if you tap on the Download folder, you should be able to scroll through and find paper texture somewhere in there. And then if you tap Import, it's going to add it in your file. You can then tap Fit Canvas to make sure it fits the canvas and then adjust it as needed. At this point though, it is just an image, so you can see it does have texture, but it is just like a regular image. So if we want it to be more like a texture that is going to be applied to our artwork, we need to change the blending mode of this new layer, the texture layer, to something like multiply or linear burn. So to change the blending mode of your layer, all you have to do is tap on the little letter next to the check mark, and then you can scroll through the list. Linear burn and multiplies are pretty much at the top. You can pick either or, they're both pretty good. And if you're working with my free paper sample and you import it in the file, I highly recommend you just rename this layer to texture or something like that, just so there's no confusion when we start painting. But in my case, I'm going to be working in the pre-textured file, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this texture layer, otherwise it's going to be a little bit too intense. So once you have your file with texture, whether it is from the free paper sample or from a pre-textured file, mine or someone else's, it doesn't matter. Go ahead and rotate your canvas so it is vertical. And then we're going to crop it so it is the size of a phone screen. So for that, go in the wrench icon menu. In the canvas submenu, select crop and resize. Now there are a lot of different phones in the world, obviously, so if you want to have the exact dimensions of your phone for your screen, just Google the model of your phone, the brand of your phone with screen size and pixels, and you should be able to find that information. Otherwise, we're going to go with a pretty standard size, which should work for both phones. So opening up the settings right here. So this is where you're going to enter the dimensions, whether the ones that you found online or the ones, just the standard ones. The first number here is the length. So since we're going with a screen that is vertical, this is where you're going to put the smaller number. In my case here, I'm going to go with the traditional 1080. And this second number here is the height of our image. So we're going to go with 1920. Don't worry about DPI or any of those other options, we just need the dimensions in pixel, that is all we need to care about. So if you just tap out of this little section here, either going to the other one or tapping on DPI or anything, you should see that it is going to crop in your image the size that we want. Once we have that, we can just tap on done, and it's going to crop our canvas, which means we're now going to have a canvas that is going to be roughly the size of our phone screen. So here you can have really any kind of design you want, but I'm going to give you some tips on making it look a little bit more like watercolor. So I'm just going to give you an example with a blob. I'm going to show you how to apply the effects, and then you can apply those effects to whatever else you might want to draw. You could draw leaves, that could be really pretty, so really whatever. So step one is just creating a new layer for all the different elements you want to draw. And then making sure that layer is below any effect layer you might have. So it could be a group of layers if you're working in a pre-textured file, or otherwise it would be just one layer if you're working with the free sample texture. It is also a good idea to just rename your layers as you go. So I'm going to rename this one to Blue Blob. So once you have your layer, just go ahead and pick whichever color you want for your shape. I'm going to pick a nice bright blue. And in this video, I'm always going to suggest a few different brushes. Some brushes are going to be free brushes that come with Procreate that you can use to follow along the video without any issues. And I'm also going to suggest watercolor brushes from my big brush bundle. Now, these brushes are not essential, but they are going to help you save time and just get more, I guess, realistic result, because these brushes do have a lot of textures within them and they really do behave like watercolors. So if you do want to check them out, the big brush bundle will be linked in the description below. But again, it is really not essential. You can follow along with free brushes. I'm going to give you tips on adding texture yourself manually. It's just going to be a little bit more time consuming. So if you're working with free brushes, I recommend just using in the airbrushing pack, so brushes that come with Procreate, the hard brush. Then lowering the opacity of the brush, probably between 40 and 50%. You can experiment here, of course, but the goal is to be able to get some overlaps between your strokes. If you do have my watercolor brushes though, go ahead and pick the Dark Edges watercolor brush. And just go ahead and draw your shape or your element. So again, I'm just going to go with a blob for this example, but you could go with something a little bit more complicated, of course. And once you have your shape, we're going to apply a few different effects to it. Now, as you can see, this watercolor brush already has a little bit of texture to it, but I'm going to show you ways to make that texture pop even more, or to completely add the texture from scratch if you're working, again, with the free brushes. So the first kind of effect we're going to add is a darker edge around your shape, which is really going to help with the watercolor effect. Now, the technique to do that is a little bit strange, so make sure you look very closely. Start by opening your layer panel, and then with 2 fingers, tap and hold onto your layer. And this is going to select the shape on the layer. Now, if the selection on your screen looks a little bit crazy, like if there are lines everywhere, don't worry about it. It's just because our shape is a little bit transparent, so Procreate has a little bit of an issue displaying the selection. But trust me, at this stage, what is selected is this shape, in my case, this blue shape. And so the first thing we're going to do to create a darker border is actually lightening the middle. And so to do that, we're going to use the feather option here at the bottom. And we are going to feather our selection. It is hard to see, but there's going to be a little line that is going to move depending on how much feathering you're adding. So here I recommend going with between 10 and 15%. And by adding this feathering, we are creating essentially a gradient in the selection. So if we tap out a feather, making sure the color fill option is deactivated, we can then adjust the color using, well, adjustment tools. So we're going to open up the adjustment panel here at the top. And with the selection still activated, we're going to use hue, saturation, and brightness. And we're going to lift up the brightness, which as you can see is going to brighten up the middle of our shape. Now, there's no right or wrong number here. It is totally up to your personal preference. I'm going to put mine probably around 80%. Now we're going to repeat this step with a slight variation. Now, instead of making the middle lighter, we're going to make the edges even darker. So go ahead and again, with 2 fingers, hold onto your layer to create a selection. But this time, since we only want to darken the edge, we're going to invert the selection. So just tapping on invert here, which means at this stage, what is selected is actually the outside of the shape. But if we go back and feather our selection, this time maybe around 10%, it is going to create a gradient from the outside towards the inside, which means the edge of the shape is going to be selected a little bit. So if we go back in our adjustment panel, selecting hue, saturation, and brightness once more, if this time we lower the brightness, we can see that we can make the edges darker. Now, when you do lower the brightness, you might also want to up the saturation, otherwise it is possible that your edges are going to turn kind of gray or black. So just make sure to, play with the saturation too. Great, so already we can see with just a darker edge, this is already starting to look so much more like watercolor. But it is just kind of one big color, so at this stage I recommend adding color variation as well, especially if you're working with free brushes. And for that, we're just going to create a random selection, so just using the selection tool, setting it to freehand, and then just kind of drawing any kind of random selection. You're then going to feather the selection as much or as little as you want. The lower the amount, the sharper the lines are going to be between the different colors, and the higher the amount, well, the more of a soft gradient it is going to be between the different colors. I'm gonna go with low 20s. And then same thing as we did before, we're going to open up the adjustment panel, selecting hue, saturation, and brightness, but this time we're going to play with the hue to introduce a different kind of color. You can also play with the saturation and brightness slider at this stage. This is totally up to you. It's just about adding color variation. Now you can repeat this step as many times as you want to add as much or as little color variation as you want. So easy, just creating a random selection, feathering your selection, and then using hue, saturation, and brightness to just kind of make it look like there's a bunch of different pigments blending together. So this is starting to look pretty good, but it still looks a little bit flat. So we're going to use the eraser to just erase some patches to make it look like the watercolor pooled in some areas and kind of ran away from some areas. Essentially, again, just adding a little bit more of that organic feel. So go ahead and select your eraser. And if you're working with free Procreate brushes, you can go in the painting pack and you can pretty much pick whichever of these brushes and use that as your eraser. I think I personally would go either with the Spectra or the Tamar. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. That being said, if you do have the big brush bundle, go ahead and set your eraser to, in the watercolor pack, of course, the color shifting blotches. From there, we're going to lower the opacity of the eraser just so that we have a little bit more control over it, maybe around 60%. And then just erasing some areas of your shape as desired. So these are the steps that you can apply to any kind of shape, any kind of element to make it look a little bit more like watercolor. Now there is an extra little step that you might want to do if you have multiple shapes to make sure that they blend well together. So I'm quickly going to go ahead and draw other blobs using the same technique behind the camera and then come back to show you how to make sure those blobs kind of work well together. So you're going to notice really quickly that when you start overlapping your shapes, it's not going to look the most like watercolor. And the reason for that is that they're stacking onto each other, but they're not really blending together. So to blend them, we're going to apply the different layers as blending means. So you can just open your layer panel and see which kind of shape you want to blend. I think this one, really, my light green blob, really looks crazy. So tapping on the little letter next to the check mark, then you can just kind of scroll through the list and see if there's something that you like. In general, I think multiply or linear burn, just like we did for the sample paper texture, is probably going to be your best bet. But you can see, just comparing from normal to linear burn, already that shape is blending in the blue one so much better. So I'm just going to do that again. I'm going to apply linear burn for this green blob as well. I'm going to apply it to the branch as well so it blends better. There we go. And maybe the dots too. Yeah. And so far we've been working with watercolor brushes that have some transparency, but it could be fun as well to go in with more of a pencil brush to add some decorative drawn elements. So for example, I had in my original one kind of these organic little white lines. And to do it's really easy. Just create a new layer. I'm going to name mine to white lines. And here, picking any color of your choice, I'm going to go with pure white. Now for those lines, we want to make sure that we don't have a brush with transparency, and we might want to go with something that has a bit more of a pencil vibe to it. So I recommend going in the sketching pack that comes with Procreate, everyone just picking the 6B pencil and using that to add your little organic lines. So once you're happy with your background, it is really easy to install it on your phone, especially if it's an iPhone. So the first step is just going to be exporting this creation as an image. So just going in the wrench icon menu, in the share submenu, in the share image top section, selecting either JPEG or PNG. I'm going to go with PNG. And then if you bring in your phone very closely, you should be able to see in the top list the airdrop icon. If you don't, make sure that Bluetooth is activated on both your phone and your iPad. So you can either select it in the list, or if you don't see it in the list, tapping on airdrop, you should be able to see it there. Then just tapping on your phone. It's going to open up the image on the phone. It's going to be in the camera roll, And from there, if you tap on the share icon on your phone, scroll down, you're going to have the option to use as a wallpaper. You can then resize it as you want, and then just tapping set, you can select if you want it on your lock screen or your home screen. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn how to create more watercolor pieces in Procreate, I highly recommend you check out this playlist because I have a bunch more videos for you. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the weekly videos. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.